Speaking of business, do we have any John McGivern updates?
McGivern. My wife is tired of hearing that name.
I bet he is.
Yes. So Saturday, big day, 48 hours from now. We'll be getting ready for the show. So 2 shows. Ticket sales are coming along. I mean, we're right now, as of this morning, we sold one this morning. We had 904 tickets sold. Which puts us in a position of easily being a $20,000 fundraiser. Certainly hoping last minute ticket buyers, either online or showing up the day of the event, brings that up closer to 950. I would love 1,000, but might be a little bit stretched too far. I got a call at 5 to 9 last night with somebody who wasn't able to buy tickets. So I was the ticket agent over the phone, buying her tickets. Hey, if they want to spend $70, I'll spend 5 minutes doing that. I will send out a reminder to all those who have signed up where we pretty much have things covered. It's not going to be a ton of work, especially since we have 2 trained people at the most difficult position, which is box office, to sell tickets, print tickets, things like that. I've got all the will call tickets printed out already. I talked to Jerry, and if Greg, you can help him, we gotta get the backdrop set up behind the curtain because we have 2 meet and greets post show. But other than that, it's a matter of welcoming people, checking tickets, get them into their seats, and John McGivern do his thing. The only thing we're lacking right now, and I've got he likes to have an area rug on stage. The school doesn't have one. I have a 6x9 one, which he said would work if we don't have 8x10, but 8x10 or larger would be better. I put that in the bulletin. I don't know if anybody has that, but if nothing else, I'll bring the 6x9. Other than that, we pretty much have things covered. So I'll send it up a reminder update for all those that have volunteered. Not a lot of training required, to welcome people and such, but a few setup items and things like that. We gotta get the cookies ready. We are gonna have cookies and water, 8-ounce bottles of water at intermission. I have those ordered or already purchased. We'll get them in there, so it should run smoothly. The weather looks to be good. I mean, good for us. 20s and partly sunny, so no snowstorms. We didn't need that. So yeah, I mean, we're advertising on Facebook still, advertised in Patch and Waukesha. We'll see if we can sell more tickets, but every ticket we sell is more fundraising. And I just communicated with John McGivern a couple days ago. Everything is set. He must be at this point still healthy and not sick or anything like that. So anyway, yeah, it's going along.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Any other updates for the group?
Board meeting next week, right?
Yep, board meeting next Wednesday, right here.
We're signing paperwork here and getting licenses. Jerry's heading up for the concessions this summer. Concessions are very successful, and we do well with those, but I think John McGivern, we're going to raise about 5 times as much as the entire summer for concessions with shows on Saturday.
We'll
take it.
Like 3 dates: July 3rd, August 9th, if we wanted, and September 20th,
which is cherry pie. Yeah. So the good news is we don't have all of them, but we are still in a position to get the primo dates. Probably the 2 biggest dates: July 3rd and cherry pie. So
upcoming speakers next week. Joe?
Tom will be here, talk a little bit about what we've done with health insurance and the benefit that's had on our employees and our district.
Okay, great. Update on the project at all?
Not right now. We're shooting for a bid package in March, and then the hope is to break ground at the end of August, beginning of September.
Awesome.
So man plans, God laughs, but we'll see how that all comes together.
I'm sure it will go well. Okay, and I guess how about Happy Finds? Jerry?
yeah. Anybody this morning? It's kind of nice when we think 20 degrees is pretty good.
Yeah, that's
better than 10 below, or didn't want a snowstorm, that's for sure.
Okay.
Knock on wood, but no pandemic. We shut it all down 2020.
Yeah. Read the last three numbers, Lori.
I have 036.
What's an early?
That's not a keeper. That's
really
good.
early. 36. Yeah.
Early one.
Earlier than me.
It's me.
Okay.
Ah,
There you go.
So,
Put in your
thank
$2.
you.
Great.
Thank you.
You're on a fixed income.
There, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so Rolling Hills Educator of the Month is Kayla Fleck. I'm going to introduce Ron Schlick, the principal at Rolling Hills. Ron is on year 25 in the Mukwonago Area School District. Wow. So when he first came, he was a math teacher, also coached football and softball. He eventually became an associate principal at Mukwonago High School, principal at Eagleville, and then he has been the principal at Rolling Hills Elementary since 2018. So year number 7, if I have my math correctly. If you paid close attention to the district flyer that came out, I don't know, when was the flyer with the test?
January.
Yeah, with the Department of Public Instruction assessment or district report cards came out. Lots of good news in the district. But Rolling Hills, out of 897 elementary schools in the state of Wisconsin, Rolling Hills report card ranked them number 12. So that is super impressive. And I'm sure Ron would tell you that is due to great families, great kids, but a wonderful staff. And I am going to have Ron come up here and introduce one of those wonderful staff members, our working staff members. Come on up, Ron. Thank you.
All right. Sean.
Yeah, go back.
All right. Thank you for having us here today. Appreciate that. I did want to introduce Kayla Fleck, our school psychologist. She is an essential part of Rolling Hills. Like Sean said, for the past 7 years, she's a proud Mukwonago graduate, and she plays a vital role in our pupil services team, providing invaluable support for our students, staff, and families. She's a member of our Raptor Way team. She helps introduce and develop our positive behavior intervention and supports initiatives. She introduced zones of regulation to our school. She oversees all of our individualized educational plans for students with special needs, and she organizes our day-to-days throughout the year to examine students' academic growth and progress. Her expertise and commitment to our students make a lasting impact on our school community every day. And I just wanted to read a few quotes from our staff who nominated Kayla. Kayla works tirelessly to advocate for and support our students. Her student first and restorative mindset offers a fresh perspective, and she always goes the extra mile for both students and staff. She consistently demonstrates a high level of respect and confidentiality for our students and families. Her follow-up is impeccable, and she always keeps what's best for students as her top priority. And Kayla brings a positive attitude every day and manages multiple roles in the building while still excelling on her own. We are incredibly lucky to have her at Rolling Hills. So congratulations, Kayla, on this well-deserved recognition. So,
All right.
Thanks.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I guess I just wanted to start by thanking all of you for having me here today. Thank you for breakfast. I really appreciate it. And I guess I just want to take the time to thank you as well, just for listening to me this morning, just about my profession and the work that I'm doing at Rolling Hills. Receiving this nomination was a bit of a shock to me because I work with so many wonderful teachers at Rolling Hills. Thank you. Okay. And so I just am very thankful and feeling very blessed this morning. So thank you for having me. When I kind of thought about like a theme to my presentation or what I wanted to talk with you guys about today, something that came to mind for me was the word pathways. And so when I think of pathways, I think of, right, like the different roads that we can take to be who we want to be, to being successful. But then I also think about pathways in terms of neural connections. So I work with students every day and I'm constantly trying to figure out how their brains work best. And trying to figure out what I can do for them socially, emotionally, academically, behaviorally, to support them. And so I'm going to be speaking with you guys today about pathways, not only my pathway, but then the pathway of students that I'm supporting as well. So I'm going to start with my pathway. So how did I become a school psychologist? You guys kind of gave away a little bit of my presentation already. So, but fun fact is that I did grow up in the Mukwonago area school district. So I went to Prairie View for kindergarten through 6th grade. I went to the middle school for 7th and 8th grade, and then I graduated from Mukwonago High School in 2011. And then I went right away to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, where I graduated in 2014. I obtained my Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and I really enjoyed my time there. One thing that I think really helped me kind of decide my future profession too was that I was a research assistant while I was there. And I kind of laugh because my subjects that I worked on varied. So I worked with kids and I helped design assessments for kids, but then I also worked with lab rats. So that was a big difference in subjects for me, but I really think it helped contribute to the work that I do today. And then between my undergraduate and graduate programs, there were a few job experiences that I had that I feel really lend themselves well to where I'm at today. So I worked at Genesee Lake School, and that's an alternate placement for students who have high behavior needs. And I worked in the residential area there. So I worked with students who were up to 18 years of age, and being that they resided in the program, I would work with them kind of in their home. So I was grocery shopping with them, I would administer medication, I would support them while they were in the residential facility, but then I would also travel with them to school. So I would support them while they were there behaviorally, academically, and socially as well. In addition, I also worked for Children's. I was a family case manager there. So I worked for Child Protective Services. And I would say that was a difficult job. Something that I, was always doing was providing resources to parents. And if their child was removed out of their care for safety reasons, it was my job to do what I could to reunify them. So what I found with those job experiences is that I loved working with families and I loved working with students alike. So I wanted to find a position that kind of married those two together. So I did then apply.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, you finished your undergrad in 3 years?
I did, 3.5 years. Yeah.
3.5 years. And at what point on this timeline
Sure.
did you decide you're going into education?
So I actually, between those two, after I was a family case manager, I actually shadowed and interviewed a school psychologist that was working at Prairie View Elementary School. And that is when I decided to apply to.
Near the end of Whitewater?
No, it was a few years after.
Oh, afterwards?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
So you weren't sure how you were gonna apply your psychology?
No, I
degree?
knew that I loved psychology. I loved learning how the brain worked. I loved learning about children and doing research, but I wasn't sure which pathway I was ready to take yet. So, yeah. When I applied to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, I was accepted into a cohort of 12 of us. And that was a very, intense program, but I really enjoyed it. So the program was 3 years in length. My first 2 years, all of the work was on campus. And so I was learning at La Crosse, but the third year then was an internship year. And unique to our program, it was a paid internship, so that was great. But while I was at La Crosse, I earned my Master's of Science in Education and then my Education Specialist degree. And that really focused on assessments. It focused on helping me learn how kids learn best, and then also helped me understand how I could differentiate lessons for kids who struggled with learning. So that was some of the main coursework that I did. I will say that I will forever be grateful for Mukwonago because they allowed me to work with them during my internship year. So I always feel like Mukwonago kind of took a bit of a chance on me. I didn't have a lot of experience under my belt, but obviously it was a good fit for both of us. And so I'm very thankful for that. So I talked about my pathway to becoming a school psychologist. But for me, that's not where it ends. I want a pathway of continuous growth. So I wanted to talk with you guys about what that looks like for me moving forward. As was mentioned, it's my 7th year at Rolling Hills. I really love that Ron and I started Rolling Hills at the same time. I find that we're always looking for those students. Our like first graduating class is this year. So we're really excited about that and kind of going through that process together. Yeah. As I continue, so I've become a nationally certified school psychologist, which means I had to submit an application and have certain credentials, but moving forward, I have to do continuous development, and that's required. They check in every 3 years. I also have regular nonviolent crisis intervention training. And so what that means is if students are escalating behaviorally, I have the training in order to attempt to de-escalate them to the best of my ability. And I always think that safety is my top priority for my students. So if there would ever be a time when a student is a threat to themselves or others, I also have the training to intervene physically with restraint if necessary. So that's something I always want to make sure I'm up to date on to make sure I'm doing it in the safest way possible. Something that is new to me this year is I'm actually supervising a practicum student. So the student is in his 2nd year of training to become a school psychologist. And obviously that's part of his program. He has to have somebody who trains him, but I'm also finding that this is very beneficial to me too. So I am up to date on my training. He's sharing his coursework with me. And so I'm very thankful for that as well. So I talked a lot about my pathway, but I want to start talking about the pathways for my students and what I do for them at Rolling Hills. And so with all of the students that we have, they all have access to what I call tier 1 supports, which is kind of within the middle of my visual there. And when I talk about students having support, they have access, right, to their teachers teaching them curriculum. They have access to the zones of regulation like you had talked about, Ron. The zones of regulation is something that my counselor and I go into every school, into every classroom, and we talk about how we can categorize our feelings into 4 different colors. And we talk about how we can have coping strategies based on the feelings we're experiencing. And so again, that's something that all of our students have access to. Ron, you mentioned too the day-to-day that I help organize. So every fall, winter, and spring, I take the data of all of our students and I organize that so that we can better understand what supports our students need, especially in the areas of reading and math. And it's not only for students who may need intensive support in reading, for example, but also for students who are really excelling in reading. So what kind of differentiation do they need so that they can keep growing? So those are all tier 1 supports or things that kids all have access to. But then you'll see I have different pathways for students who might need something different. And so, for example, I have one pathway is individual and small groups. So I work with kids in individual and small group settings. Right now, I have what's called a lunch bunch. So I eat my lunch with my 4th grade boys who are working on impulse control. And you would think that's something that they wouldn't prefer to work on. But our group is on Thursdays, and every Wednesday they come knocking at my door, reminding me that we have group on Thursday. So I'm very thankful for working with students in small group settings. Another pathway I have listed on here, I won't go through all of them, but is a 504 plan. So if a student is identified as a student with a disability and they need accommodations in order to be successful, then that's something that I work on providing them as well. We also have crisis response and management, which I talked about a little bit already, but a large part of my role, again, is just making sure that students are safe. And so some students, in order to be successful, they need crisis response. So some students have thoughts of self-harm or suicidal ideation, and that's where I need to step in to ask those difficult questions and make sure that they're getting the support that they need. The pathway that I'm going to focus on today, though, is special education evaluations, because that's something that is very unique to my role. You know, others can help with individual and small groups and sensory breaks and things like that, but my expertise is really in special education evaluation. So I'm going to just touch on that a little bit. So I created a bit of a timeline for you guys to see what a special education evaluation could look like. So I'm going to use the example if a parent came to me and said that they feel their student might have autism. And so I start, with the referral process. And I always want to make sure that I'm very transparent with parents. So if a parent comes to me and says, hey, I think my child may have autism, I want to start by just kind of like laying some groundwork and telling them, while I can help you by helping you understand if your child qualifies for services, what I can't do is diagnose autism, right? I'm not a doctor, so that's something that I'm unable to do for you. However, again, I can help you understand if your child would benefit from some school services. So I go through their parent rights, making sure that they understand the process. I'm very transparent. And then I want to make sure that I clarify their concerns as well. So do you have speech and language concerns? Do you have fine motor concerns for your child? What are the concerns that you have? So that I'm able to organize the correct professionals to be a part of that. Once I've gone through the referral, I complete the actual evaluation, and you can see some of the things that I do as a part of that. So a record review, we go through rating scales, assessments, interviews and observations, and I take this role very seriously because a parent is coming to me asking for more data about their child, and I want to be as comprehensive as possible. So some of my favorite things about evaluations is interviewing the student themselves, asking what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and how can we make school a better place for them. Once I've gathered all of that data, I condense it into a report for the parent. And when I say condense, it usually ends up being like 30 pages long. But I want to make sure that they have all the data that they need and that they've requested for their child. So I want to make sure my reports are parent friendly. I like to include visuals where I can. And again, I like to be comprehensive. Once I've shared that report with them, then we hold a meeting with all of the team members, and depending on the needs of the child, there could be, sometimes 12 team members that are sitting around the table. And my job at that point is to facilitate a productive meeting so that we can make a choice that's in the best interest of the child. And so one of the biggest things that I want to make sure occurs during my meetings is that the parent voice is being heard. So I feel like the rapport that you build with the parent throughout the process, when they get to that meeting, hopefully they're in a place where they feel they can talk openly about how they feel about the evaluation and the results. Finally, then we come together and we make a support decision. So I always like parents to know that we go through the evaluation process, but it doesn't always end in what's called an individualized education plan for the child. Sometimes they may have a 504 plan, or maybe we're just brainstorming some strategies to support their child within the classroom. But it can be difficult when maybe team members don't agree or they see a different vision for where their evaluation was going. So you want to make sure that you can facilitate those productive conversations in the best interest of the child. The slide that I want to leave you guys with then is pathways to positivity. So these are some of the things, I put some images on here that when the days are hard or stressful, reasons why I love doing my job. And so some of the pathways to positivity that I've included, here's what we call an AAC device. It's utilized for children who are nonverbal or non-speaking. And so when they want to share their thoughts, they press to certain buttons that can communicate for them. And so when a parent comes to me and says that their child learned a new button on their AAC device and is able to get a new need, that's something that warms my heart. I included a box of Kleenex because I have a lot of parents that will cry in my office, but happy tears. And they will say, like, this is the first time that I feel I'm being heard, or this is the first time that I feel my child is getting the support that they need. And that means a lot to me. I also have a picture of a walkie-talkie. Ron knows well that I always have my walkie-talkie on me, to the point sometimes I feel like I hear calls where there are Denny. But I, when I go to a situation for a student who's escalated and where normally it might take them 30 minutes to calm down, but they've gained trust with me and it only takes them maybe 10 minutes, that's a huge win for me. So the final thing that I have here is just I am the I in IEP. So for me, when students can be involved in their education, that's really all that I'm looking for. And I would say one of the biggest wins for me is when I get an email from the middle or the high school and they say, hey, Kayla, somebody from your caseload who you qualified maybe when they were 4 years old no longer needs their IEP, which means that the services and supports that we provided them worked and they met their outlined goals. So I truly can't think of anything better than knowing the supports that I'm providing are truly benefiting kids. So that is what I wanted to leave you guys with, but any questions that you guys have for me?
So the office.
What is IEP?
Yeah, so it's the individualized education plan. So when we go through like the evaluation process for a student, sometimes the end result is an individualized education plan. And what that is it's a document that outlines the supports and services that the child will receive. So let's say they're having significant difficulties in reading, for example. This plan will outline their reading goals, but then it will also provide the services that the child needs to close the gaps in reading that we've identified. So it's an individualized plan for every single student that shows that they need one, so that we can close the gaps we've identified. Yeah.
Our IEP and the 504 plan, the same thing.
That's a wonderful question. So they are different. An IEP provides direct services from like a special education teacher, a speech pathologist, or an occupational therapist, while a 504 plan just outlines accommodations. An example of an accommodation could be a child needs extended time on testing. Maybe they need a separate setting for testing for a least disrupting environment. So they are different documents. That's a great question.
So the office has the walkie-talkie and then you're like the 911 call?
I would say Dr. Schlicht, myself, and the school counselor are the kind of 911 calls. We all have walkies, like our special education teachers and our pupil services team, but when there's behaviors that the teachers feel like they can no longer manage on their own, that's where we kind of come in as that crisis management to support with the skills that we have.
Wait, so you mentioned counselor, so there's school psychologist and then there's counselor?
Yes.
What does the counselor do?
So counselor does things like they implement our SEL lessons, which is our student, social emotional learning. As well as they also they oversee all the 504 plans. And Kayla oversees the IEPs. So it's two different roles.
What does your average day look like? You have the appointments with students, you go in to a classroom, and what is your?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say a typical day can be a little bit hard to describe just because with the walkie call, sometimes that kind of throws off the whole day and then I spend my day doing that. But I would say a typical day, I usually start my morning at 7:30 if I have an evaluation meeting or an IEP meeting. I would say that's probably 3 days out of the week I have that. Then I spend a lot of my day, so there could be potentially 15 evaluations that are going on at once. So I spend a lot of my time in classrooms observing, scoring rating scales, interviewing teachers. And then I also build in times throughout my day where I'm working with students. So like I talked about the lunch bunch group that I work with, I'll have them come to me. I also have individuals that I meet with. I have scheduled sensory breaks with students throughout the day. Sometimes I also work with St. John's, which is another school. So I go there for evaluations also. So every day looks a little bit different, but that would be it. Yeah.
What percentage of the school's population requires your service?
So I would say, and I'm not like trying to like boost my ego, but I would say I am working with 100% of our population. When I go in and I do the zones of regulation training, that's with all of our students. So I make sure that I go in the schools, or I mean, in the classrooms to every single classroom multiple times throughout the year. But I would say, what is the percentage on the report card would probably be like,
It was under 15.
that's what I was thinking, maybe like 12%
12 to 13.
would be my best guess on students that require IEPs. Yeah. Yeah.
Two questions. One is,
Sure.
is the ranger walkie-talkie right now?
I did not bring it with me.
Oh,
Yeah.
But I have gone out to my car and I've been notified in the car.
They
so.
are capable of district-wide notifications. So from Big Bend to North Prairie, we can communicate with the 504.
And that leads to my second question.
Sure.
Segue. Is your role indicated in other elementary schools?
Yes. Okay. And I would say our district is very big on, safety and making sure that students are supported socially and emotionally and behaviorally. So this is a reason why I love working for this district is they have my position in every single elementary building, also at the middle and the high school. So our role is really important. And so I think McGuanago sees the value in that.
typical with other districts? I don't, I never realized that.
Yeah, that's very, the,
Oh, okay.
the elementary school psychs, you know, we have a counselor and a psych in each of our buildings. A lot of school districts have placed a school psych due to the, I don't know, the breadth of the abilities, of the school psych to do everything that Kayla had a few slides ago. So, yeah, the school psych has become much more prevalent, in schools. You know, my only criticism of the profession is you have 12 in your graduate program.
Right.
And school districts can't find enough. So, I mean, extremely valuable employees, they bring a lot to our schools, but the programs are very small, so.
As the husband of a 7th and 8th grade teacher, I can't imagine how bad it would be if you guys didn't do your good work when they're in elementary school.
I have a question. What kind of tips do you give fourth grade boys for impulse control? And how successful has that gone? How is that working?
Yeah. The program that I do with the fourth grade boys is called Hunter and his amazing remote control. So a lot of our fourth grade boys love video games, right? And so this really like equates their brain to a remote control or a video game controller. And we talk about things like pausing before you do something, rewinding and reflecting on maybe a choice that you made that wasn't the greatest. Fast forwarding and thinking about consequences of our actions. And surprisingly, they really buy into it. We have these little remote controls that are colored. They actually asked if they could keep them on their desk. And it's something that the classroom teachers then can talk to them about too. Like it's right there on your desk. Hey, did you pause before you said what you just said? So our teachers are great at generalizing the things that are learned in group into the classroom setting. So we're still working on it, but they enjoy coming and what they tell me.
Maybe that should be required for all fourth grade boys.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And not necessarily a question for you, but for the administrators, every job in a school is challenging and difficult, but are these specialists like school psychologists, are they on the same pay scale as a 2nd grade teacher, 3rd grade, or are these specialists looked at?
We
Differently.
they're compensated differently.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of education that Kayla
Education,
has
yes.
just to get into the profession.
Right.
Requires the advanced degree. I think it's an EDS right now is what universities are requiring, correct?
Yeah, I have to have my master's and then also my education
Yeah.
specialist degree.
So
Yeah.
school psychs are starting much higher than say a 2nd grade teacher.
As a district, how, with all the problems that we have nationally, what is the district that would be, help prevent and, work on different, programs, practices, different things to keep from having any, I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the social and emotional part of
Yeah.
it, please, and then we can kind of talk about, then we can.
How do you find them as they're?
So, how do you find them? I mean, we have, anonymous tip, speak up, speak out program. Which is a great way for people who are concerned about a friend, to reach out. We've got professionals in place who are working with kids at that lower level, you know, I mean, again, it's early prevention, right? If you find a kid who is having emotional, mental health issues at the elementary level, and you can identify that, you can start to prevent those things, down the road. From a school safety standpoint, you know, we have measures in place and we continue to expand, those measurements. I think the big key thing though that we need to talk about is one, Kayla's talked about social emotional learning, right? That has taken on an absolute negative connotation nationally. And what we're finding is more and more kids are coming to school absent the socialization that we would have had when we were younger. It's a childhood now is a lot more isolated and it's also a lot more governed by adults. So kids really, I've talked about this before, kids really don't know how to work out their problems in a meaningful way. On their own, they always have to have an adult support in place. I think we have to acknowledge that and realize that social emotional development has become part of what we need to do in schools. We have to get past that on the national scale. That narrative is nonsense. This is what kids need because this is what is coming to us. I think the other part of it is though, is it does look at, everybody looks at the school as to what is the school gonna do? And it's important to remember that from the time a kid enters at kindergarten and the time they graduate, we've only actually had 1 year's worth of time with them. In that 12-year period of time, they've had 11 years with parents, peers, or by themselves. And we have to start to acknowledge the fact that the school can't be the place that does all of it. And that's the biggest, I think that's the other thing. You know, you get a group of state representatives, you get a Department of Public Instruction, you get folks at Washington DC, and they say, hey, school got to do this, school's got to do that. Our time is finite, right? I mean, we start at 7:30 in the morning, we end at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We start on September 1st, we end on June 10th. That's our window. And if people keep asking us to do more within that window and not understand that there's a bigger picture out there, there's more need out there, we're going to continue to run into the same problems.
I don't ask the question from a standpoint of what it is that it's expected to do. I just look at it from a high degree of prevention.
Yep.
I wouldn't expect more out of somebody. I would just try to prevent something from happening.
Yeah, no, and that's what we do. I mean, you know, we do all the preventative things, and Kayla is a perfect example of that. Our teachers do a great job with kids on the front end. We have security measures in place. But I think as we start to go forward, we have to have an understanding that if we really want to stop this, if we really want to stop it, it's at home, it's in the community, it's at church, and then it's at school.
I think our teachers do a wonderful job of trying to recognize any early signs or changes in behavior for kids too. Like I've had a teacher come to me and say, hey, this kid's writing sample is a little more maybe depressive than normal. And having me just talk with that student right away to say, hey, we've noticed a change in your behavior, what's going on? And communicating that with the families too. So I think our teachers are amazing advocates for kids and kind of catching those like red flags to be preventative too. So.
We've also coached our kids to understand that the adults at school are reliable and trustworthy, and we talk about building relationships with kids, and I think for me that's the number one way to prevent things from happening is by building strong relationships with kids. And if the students trust the adult, they're more willing to come forward and say, hey, you know, my classmate did this or said this or wrote this, and I'm concerned, can you help? And I think our kids are much more equipped, I think, to do that because of our staff being so open and honest and trustworthy and building relationships with all kids.
Is it true that Rolling Hills is no longer gonna be a voting site?
Yes,
It is not going to be.
correct. Yeah.
A little pushback, I think, from some in the community, but it doesn't seem like a controversial decision.
Big Bend is no longer a site either.
And we are in conversations with those municipalities as to what could be done differently. What could we offer up? To try to accommodate that.
Any other questions? Awesome, great job.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
We show our gratitude for coming out on this cold morning. We have our plaque here,
Thank
and
you so much.
Educator of the Month
Thank
for
you.
February, and then also a gift card. So
Thank you
you
so much.
bet. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And if we could get a picture after
Of
the
course.
meeting, that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll let you
Yeah.
go through here. Any other business items? Anything else? If
I was gonna mention, John McGivern show is successful enough that we didn't need to go and pull from our usual sponsors and such. Although Rick Debe and DBI Insurance is sponsoring the intermission, so he's covering the cost of the cookies, and we're gonna give him some recognition that day and all that. So good of Rick to help out defray some of the cost.
excellent.
Don't forget your juices next week.
Yeah, I have some out on the.
I will deliver to the kitchen cover next Thursday.
Nice, awesome. Okay. Let's do the four-way test as we leave this meeting and go back out into the world of life and work. The things we think, say, and do, let us remember to ask ourselves first, is it true? Second, is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Have a great week, everybody. See you Saturday.